I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine walking into a room and realizing in the deepest core of your being that everything you built, everything you believed was untouchable, is slipping through your fingers. Overnight, gone. Not because of a single misstep, not because of laziness or failure, but because the world decided it would. Because rumors, whispers, and misinterpretations became louder than your truth. That was me, Johnny, standing in the ruins of a career I thought was bulletproof. One moment, cameras were flashing, fans were cheering. I was living the life I had dreamt of since I was a child. Roles that challenged me, friendships that felt real, and a love for my craft that no amount of money or fame could dilute. And then, everything shattered. It's not a story about revenge. It's not about justice. This is a story about what it feels like to lose yourself in public view, to have your narrative ripped from your hands, to feel invisible in a world that once celebrated you. Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt the floor disappear beneath you? Where the person you were yesterday feels like a stranger? This is where my story begins. And if you stay with me, I promise it's not just about loss. It's about finding strength, clarity, and an unexpected kind of freedom in the ashes of failure. I was born in a world that demanded performance, not authenticity. A child trying to find himself in a house that never quite fit the image of stability. Loneliness was familiar, quiet, echoing, a constant companion. I learned early that performance was survival. Smile when it hurts. Speak when you want to scream. Appear confident when inside fear lives. Acting became my sanctuary. Not the fame, not the glittering Hollywood nights. The craft itself, the challenge of becoming someone else, someone real on screen, was my escape, my therapy, my rebellion against the chaos I couldn't control. Every role I took was a piece of me, shared with strangers who didn't know my face, yet somehow recognized my truth. I wasn't just acting, I was surviving. I was hoping that if I could master a character, perhaps I could master my own life. Perhaps I could control my story before life controlled me. And for a time, it worked. The accolades, the movies, the money. It felt like the universe was affirming me. Yet behind the red carpets, behind the interviews and magazine covers, there was a storm gathering. Quiet at first, subtle. A misstep here, a misunderstanding there. But storms have a way of hiding in clear skies until the lightning strikes. Have you ever ignored small warnings, thinking the world would remain as it seemed? That's a dangerous illusion. I ignored it. We all do, in our own ways. I remember sitting in my Los Angeles home, reading headlines that twisted my own words into accusations. Friends called to check if I was okay, but the truth? I wasn't. Not even close. The lines between fact and fiction blurred. My career, my reputation, even the people I trusted felt like strangers. And the hardest part? The silence, not the public outcry. At that moment, I realized something profound. Your life can be rewritten by anyone, at any time, but your spirit is yours alone. How you respond is the measure of your truth, your strength, and ultimately, your freedom. Pause. Music softens to a reflective tone. The first story I want to share is not about fame, or movies, or the red carpet. It's about failure. The kind that strikes without warning. The kind that makes you question your identity. The kind that forces you to look in the mirror and ask, who am I if the world no longer believes in me? Because if I had learned nothing else in the chaos that followed, it's that the moments of deepest despair can become the foundation of your greatest strength. They can teach you about resilience, about love, about authenticity, and about the life you were meant to live beyond the applause. Before the world judged me, before headlines defined me, I had to face myself. And that journey is what I want you to hear next. I want you to pause for a moment and think about this. What does failure feel like to you? Not the kind you rehearse in your mind, but the one that hits you in the chest so hard it knocks the air out of your lungs. That's the failure I experienced. Not because I made a single catastrophic mistake, but because the world around me decided that I had. I remember walking into the premiere of one of my films, feeling the buzz, the flashing cameras, the applause. And yet, somewhere in that glittering crowd, I felt a strange, creeping emptiness. Critics had started writing things I didn't recognize. People I thought I knew began whispering, misinterpreting, assuming. And overnight, this is the lesson I learned. Your reputation is not yours alone. It is borrowed from others, and it can vanish in an instant. But your integrity, your commitment to truth, your inner voice, those are yours forever. Ask yourself, how much of your life is defined by the perception of others? How much do you bend or break yourself to fit a mold you didn't create? Because here's the truth. The world will always try to rewrite your story. Your challenge is to hold the pen. I'll never forget the night I first felt the sting of silent betrayal. It wasn't dramatic, not in the cinematic sense. There were no shouting matches, no grand confrontations, just quiet. Letters left unopened, calls unanswered, friends who became strangers overnight. And suddenly, I realized that some people are loyal not to you, but to convenience, to public opinion, to the tides of judgment. I sat alone in my home, the night stretching endlessly, and I began to question everything. My choices, my relationships, my identity. The reflection in the mirror felt like a stranger staring back, someone I thought I knew, but who had been overshadowed by circumstance. And yet, it was here, in this solitude, that I discovered the first real strength of my life, self-reliance. I couldn't control the world. I couldn't control the gossip or the judgment, but I could control how I responded. I could decide whether I would crumble or rise. I want you to reflect on this. When the world turns its back, do you look for blame or do you look for your own center? Do you anchor yourself in truth or are you adrift in someone else's version of reality? The second lesson came in the form of trust. Its fragility, its weight, its dangerous allure. I had always believed in people. I had always trusted that kindness, honesty, and openness would guide me. But in Hollywood, trust is often mistaken for weakness. People will take what you offer freely and weaponize it, twist it into something unrecognizable, and then smile as if nothing happened. It was during one of the darkest periods of my career, when rumors swirled and the tabloids thrived on distortion, I realized that some of the people closest to me, agents, managers, even friends I considered family, were quietly negotiating versions of my life that benefited themselves. And in that moment, I felt utterly alone. But there was a paradoxical clarity that emerged from the pain. When you strip away illusions, you see the bones of reality. You see who is real, who is loyal, who will stand by you when everything collapses. And perhaps most importantly, you see yourself. Ask yourself, who do you truly trust? Are they worthy of that trust? And when betrayal comes, as it always does in one form or another, how do you respond? Because these questions are not just philosophical, they are survival. It's easy to look back and romanticize struggle, to say, I learned so much, but when you are in the storm, when your career, your reputation, and your very identity are under assault, learning feels impossible. Pain is sharp. Isolation is suffocating. the world feels unfair. And yet, in the quiet moments between the chaos, the lessons emerge. I began to see patterns, understand truths, and make choices that were not about fame or money or validation, but about survival and authenticity. Here's the mini-climactic realization from this phase of my journey. Your greatest teacher is the moment when everything you hold dear is threatened. The pain itself carries wisdom if you're willing to listen. Reflect. What has life taken from you? And more importantly, what can it teach you if you let it? Music swells to a subtle but hopeful crescendo, then dips into reflective strings. In the chapters that follow, I want to share 10 more experiences, each a piece of a puzzle that rebuilt me. From moments of complete despair to flashes of clarity, from heartbreak to unexpected breakthroughs, these are the stories that shaped not just my career, but my understanding of resilience, identity, and human connection. Each story is a thread in a tapestry of lessons about love, trust, failure, and the courage to face the truth of who you are, regardless of what the world thinks. And as you listen, I want you to keep a question in mind. When your life falls apart, how do you rebuild it? Not just to survive, but to thrive. One of the hardest lessons came not from betrayal or rumor, but from expectation. The world believes that if you've succeeded once, you must succeed again, that your next role, your next decision, must be perfect. And when you stumble, even slightly, that perfection crumbles. I had just completed a film that I poured my heart into. Every line, every gesture, every emotion, crafted meticulously, rehearsed in quiet solitude until it felt like it belonged to me completely. And yet, when it premiered, the critics' words cut deeper than I had anticipated. They weren't just critiques, they were judgments of my identity, my worth, my soul. It was then I realized the expectation of perfection is not a gift, it's a burden. And the world will not remind you that you are human. It will punish you for it. Ask yourself, are you living your life for yourself or for the judgment of others? Are you allowing fear of failure to dictate your choices? Because here's the truth I discovered. The moment you let go of others' expectations, you reclaim your freedom. You can fail, you can stumble, but you can do so without losing yourself. Then there was the illusion of control. I had spent years believing that my career, my life, my destiny were somehow under my control. I scheduled, I planned, I negotiated, I fought. And yet one series of events reminded me how fragile that illusion really is. Contracts, public perception, relationships, they can all shift in an instant. What you thought was solid ground can turn into quicksand while you're walking confidently across it. I learned that day that life isn't about controlling circumstances. It's about mastering your response to them. I remember sitting in my apartment late at night, the city lights of Los Angeles sprawling beneath me like a tapestry of dreams and failures. I realized that I had been so busy trying to control the uncontrollable that I had ignored the one thing I could control: my own spirit, my own choices, my own truth. Reflect. What in your life are you trying desperately to control? And how much energy are you losing in the process, rather than finding strength in acceptance? This lesson changed the way I approached everything, from relationships to career decisions, to even the smallest personal moments. Control is an illusion, but agency, the choice of how you move through life, is real. The fifth experience was heartbreak, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but seeps in quietly, leaving an ache that feels endless. It was not just romantic heartbreak. It was the heartbreak of watching dreams dissolve, of losing trust in people you once believed would never betray you, of seeing your own reputation twisted beyond recognition. I remember sitting in a quiet hotel room, the walls thin and the world distant, thinking, how do you keep moving when everything you loved seems to have disappeared? When the applause stops, the cameras fade, and the world moves on without you. It was then I realized that heartbreak, no matter how sharp, carries with it an essential gift, the chance to grow, to rebuild, to discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. I began to see that pain is not just something to endure, it is a guide. It can teach resilience, humility, empathy, and self-knowledge in ways comfort never could. Ask yourself, what heartbreak in your life has shaped you more than any success ever could? And what lessons are hidden in that pain, waiting for you to uncover them? In the midst of chaos, one of my first turning points was realizing the power of silence. In Hollywood, everyone has an opinion. Everyone wants to comment, to judge, to project their interpretation onto your life. And I learned quickly that responding to every whisper, every headline, every rumor was a trap. So I stopped. I withdrew, not from the world, but from the need to justify myself to it. I stopped explaining. I stopped defending. I let silence do the work. And in that silence, something miraculous happened. Clarity. I could hear my own thoughts again. I could assess my choices, my mistakes, and my path forward without the noise of the crowd. When was the last time you embraced silence instead of filling it with excuses, justifications, or distractions? Sometimes, the most profound lessons come when you stop speaking and start listening to yourself. The second turning point came when I realized that the person the world wanted me to be was not the person I needed to be. Fame, accolades, approval, these are intoxicating, seductive, and often dangerous. I had spent years crafting an image, performing not just on screen, but off it, trying to meet expectations that weren't mine. And then, in the quiet aftermath of my career's collapse, I asked a simple question: who am I if no one applauds? The answer was both terrifying and liberating. I am the sum of my choices, my passions, my flaws, my humanity. I am not the headlines, not the gossip, not the roles I play. I am Johnny, raw, flawed, human, and alive. And that realization, authenticity, was a turning point. I began to embrace the man I was, not the version of me the world wanted. And in that embrace, I discovered resilience, peace, and a new kind of freedom. Ask yourself, who are you beneath the expectations, the pressures, and the judgments? Are you living as your authentic self, or as a reflection of what others want you to be? By this point in my journey, I had been tested, betrayed, disappointed, and heartbroken. But each experience was a stepping stone, each heartbreak a teacher, each moment of failure an opportunity to reclaim my life. The mini-climactic realization here is simple but profound. The moments that feel like the end often contain the seeds of your rebirth. Your response to adversity shapes your destiny far more than the adversity itself. Reflect. When life seems to collapse around you, what seeds can you plant in the ruins? What lessons can you carry forward that will allow you to rise stronger, wiser, and more grounded than before? One of the hardest lessons came not from betrayal or rumor, but from expectation. The world believes that if you've succeeded once, you must succeed again, that your next role, your next decision, must be perfect. And when you stumble, even slightly, that perfection crumbles. I had just completed a film that I poured my heart into. Every line, every gesture, every emotion, crafted meticulously, rehearsed in quiet solitude until it felt like it belonged to me completely. And yet, when it premiered, the critics' words cut deeper than I had anticipated. They weren't just critiques, they were judgments of my identity, my worth, my soul. One of the hardest lessons came not from betrayal or rumor, but from expectation. The world believes that if you've succeeded once, you must succeed again, that your next role, your next decision, must be perfect. And when you stumble, even slightly, that perfection crumbles. I had just completed a film that I poured my heart into. Every line, every gesture, every emotion, crafted meticulously, rehearsed in quiet solitude until it felt like it belonged to me completely. And yet, when it premiered, the critics' words cut deeper than I had anticipated. They weren't just critiques, they were judgments of my identity, my worth, my soul. It was then I realized the expectation of perfection is not a gift. It's a burden. And the world will not remind you that you are human. It will punish you for it. Ask yourself, are you living your life for yourself or for the judgment of others? Are you allowing fear of failure to dictate your choices? Then there was the illusion of control. I had spent years believing that my career, my life, my destiny were somehow under my control. I scheduled, I planned, I negotiated, I fought. And yet, one series of events reminded me how fragile that illusion really is. Contracts, public perception sprawling beneath me like a tapestry of dreams and failures. I realized that I had been so busy trying to control the uncontrollable that I had ignored the one thing I could control: my own spirit, my own choices, my own truth. Reflect. What in your life are you trying desperately to control? And how much energy are you losing in the process, rather than finding strength in acceptance? This lesson changed the way I approached everything, from relationships to career decisions to even the smallest personal moments. Control is an illusion, but agency, the choice of how you move through life, is real. The fifth experience was heartbreak, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but seeps in quietly, leaving an ache that feels endless. It was not just romantic heartbreak. It was the heartbreak of watching dreams dissolve, of losing trust in people you once believed would never betray you, of seeing your own reputation twisted beyond recognition. I remember sitting in a quiet hotel room, the walls thin and the world distant, thinking, how do you keep moving when everything you loved seems to have disappeared? When the applause stops, the cameras fade, and the world moves on without you? It was then I realized that heartbreak, no matter how sharp, carries with it an essential gift: the chance to grow, to rebuild, to discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. I began to see that pain is not just something to endure, it is a guide. It can teach resilience, humility, empathy, and self-knowledge in ways comfort never could. Ask yourself, what heartbreak in your life has shaped you more than any success ever could? And what lessons are hidden in that pain? So, I hope you've been enjoying it, waiting for you to uncover them. In the midst of chaos, one of my first turning points was realizing the power of silence. In Hollywood, everyone has an opinion. Everyone wants to comment, to judge, to project their interpretation onto your life. And I learned quickly that responding to every whisper, every headline, every rumor was a trap. So I stopped. I withdrew, not from the world, but from the need to justify myself to it. I stopped explaining. I stopped defending. I let silence do the work. And in that silence, something miraculous happened. Clarity. I could hear my own thoughts again. I could assess my choices, my mistakes, and my path forward without the noise of the crowd. Reflect. When was the last time you embraced silence instead of filling it with excuses, justifications, or distractions? Sometimes the most profound lessons come when you stop speaking and start listening to yourself. The second turning point came when I realized that the person the world wanted me to be was not the person I needed to be. Fame, accolades, approval, these are intoxicating, seductive, and often dangerous. I had spent years crafting an image, performing not just on screen, but off it, trying to meet expectations that weren't mine. And then, in the quiet aftermath of my career's collapse, I asked a simple question: who am I if no one applauds? The answer was both terrifying and liberating. I am the sum of my choices, my passions, my flaws, my humanity. I am not the headlines, not the gossip, not the roles I play. I am Johnny, raw, flawed, human, and alive. And that realization, authenticity, was a turning point. I began to embrace the man I was, not the version of me the world wanted. And in that embrace, I discovered resilience, peace, and a new kind of freedom. Ask yourself, who are you beneath the expectations, the pressures, and the judgments? Are you living as your authentic self, or as a reflection of what others want you to be? By this point in my journey, I had been tested, betrayed, disappointed, and heartbroken. But each experience was a stepping stone, each heartbreak a teacher, each moment of failure an opportunity to reclaim my life. The mini-climactic realization here is simple, but profound. The moments that feel like the end often contain the seeds of your rebirth. Your response to adversity shapes your destiny far more than the adversity itself. One of the cruelest ironies I discovered was the loneliness of success. People assume that achieving your dreams brings fulfillment, applause, and endless connection. And for a time, it did. But beneath the glitter, beneath the roles, awards, and recognition, there's often an emptiness that no spotlight can fill. I remember walking through a party, Hollywood elite all around me, champagne in hand, laughter echoing. But I felt utterly disconnected. I realized that the fame that once felt like armor had become a cage. Everyone saw the persona I presented to the world, but few saw the person behind the mask. It was then I understood something essential. Success without self-understanding is a hollow victory. You can have everything the world desires, and yet feel nothing. You can win accolades and awards, yet feel like a stranger to yourself. The seventh experience taught me the power of vulnerability. For years, I had shielded myself, presenting a persona that was strong, unbreakable, untouchable. And yet, the collapse of my career, the whispers, the betrayal, exposed something I hadn't anticipated. Vulnerability is strength. I remember sitting with a close friend, my voice barely above a whisper, confessing fears I had never spoken aloud. The act of opening up, of admitting doubt and fragility, created a connection deeper than any I had known. I realized then that vulnerability is not weakness. It is authenticity. It allows empathy, trust, and real human connection. The eighth experience was one I wish I could have embraced earlier. Failure is not punishment, it is a teacher. My career had been defined by early success, yet it was in the moments of loss, of public scrutiny, of whispered accusations that I truly learned who I was. I remember a particularly devastating moment when a film I had poured myself into was publicly ridiculed. It felt like a personal attack, a validation of my worst fears. And in the silence that followed, I asked myself, why did this hurt so much? The answer was simple: because I had tied my identity to external approval. From that moment on, I resolved to separate my self-worth from my achievements. I realized that every failure, every misstep, is a lesson wrapped in pain. If you are willing to pay attention, to reflect, to adjust, Failure becomes the most powerful catalyst for growth. After these experiences, a deeper turning point emerged, reclaiming control over my life. Not the illusion of control, but the real, tangible control over my responses, my choices, and my narrative. I stopped allowing gossip, headlines, and other people's agendas to dictate my mood, my career, or my identity. I began creating deliberate space for reflection, for meditation, for thinking about what I truly valued. I realized that life is not about eliminating chaos. It's about learning to navigate it with integrity and self-awareness. Reflect. Where in your life are you giving your power away? And what would it look like to reclaim it, piece by piece, choice by choice? A fourth turning point was unexpected: gratitude in the midst of struggle. For years, I had assumed gratitude was for when life was easy, for the celebrations and victories. But I discovered that gratitude is most powerful when life feels impossible. When your career has collapsed and the world seems to have turned against you. I began keeping a journal, noting small victories, fleeting moments of connection, and even the lessons hidden in pain. Each entry became a lifeline, a reminder that even in darkness, there is light to be found. Ask yourself, what are you grateful for right now in the middle of your struggle? How might noticing even small moments of beauty transform your perspective, your choices, and your resilience? Gratitude didn't make my problems disappear, but it gave me perspective, strength, and a foundation from which I could rebuild. It reminded me that life is never entirely bleak, even when it feels that way. By this stage of my journey, I had experienced betrayal, heartbreak, public scrutiny, isolation, and the weight of expectation. Yet, each experience brought clarity. Each failure taught me resilience. Each heartbreak revealed strength I didn't know I possessed. The mini-climactic realization here is crucial. It's not the collapse of your career, your relationships, or your reputation that defines you. It's how you rise after. The human spirit, when tested, has an almost limitless capacity for recovery, for growth, and for reinvention. Reflect. When life tests you in ways that feel unbearable, how do you respond? Do you succumb? Or do you find the courage to rise, piece by piece, lesson by lesson? The ninth experience was perhaps the most daunting: learning to embrace failure publicly. When your life is lived in front of cameras, when headlines dissect your every move, when the world seems to judge your every decision, you realize quickly that hiding from failure is impossible. I had tried for years to maintain a flawless image, to appear untouchable, to mask my human struggles. But the more I resisted, the more it consumed me. Then came a turning point. Instead of hiding, I began to acknowledge mistakes openly, not as excuses, not as defenses, but as truths. It was terrifying. Vulnerability under public scrutiny feels like walking across a tightrope over a stormy ocean. One slip, and the world will judge. But the paradox is that once you embrace it, you gain a freedom that cannot be taken from you. I discovered that admitting imperfection builds connection, trust, and ultimately, liberation. The 10th experience was about reinvention. After losing so much, I realized that survival required not only resilience, but evolution. My career, my identity, my relationships, they had all been shaken. And yet, from that upheaval, I could forge a new version of myself. I began exploring new creative paths, choosing roles for passion rather than prestige, surrounding myself with people who inspired authenticity rather than conformity, and reclaiming the simple joys I had ignored while chasing approval. Each choice became a statement. I am not defined by my losses. I am defined by how I respond. Ask yourself, how could you reinvent yourself if your past were no longer a limitation, but a foundation. What version of yourself could you build if you embraced both your failures and your dreams with equal courage? The first climactic turning point was realizing that my identity could no longer depend on external validation. For years, I had tied my sense of self to success, recognition, and approval. And when the world withdrew its applause, I faced a terrifying question. Who am I if no one is watching? The answer was not immediate. It required long nights of introspection, conversations with trusted friends, and the acceptance that identity is not given, it is claimed. I began to define myself through choices, values, and actions, rather than headlines and whispers. Reflection. When external validation disappears, who do you become? How can you define yourself without approval from others? The second turning point came through purpose. I realized that no setback could diminish the value of a life lived intentionally. Purpose became my compass, a guiding principle that transcended fame, fortune, and criticism. Every role, every creative endeavor, every personal decision was measured against this principle. Does this align with who I truly am? I stopped asking, will this please others? And began asking, does this fulfill me? Ask yourself, what is your purpose? How would your life change if every decision, every action was aligned with it rather than the fleeting judgments of others? Purpose, I discovered, is the antidote to despair. It gives meaning to struggle, clarity to confusion, and direction to chaos. By this stage, a pattern emerges. Betrayal teaches self-reliance. Heartbreak teaches growth. Failure teaches lessons. And reflection teaches clarity. But the emotional payoff begins when these lessons converge. I began to feel a resilience I had never known. Not the superficial kind that pretends nothing hurts, but the deep, unshakable kind that allows pain and joy to coexist. I learned to accept life as it is, not as I wish it would be. I discovered that freedom lies not in perfection, but in embracing imperfection. Ask yourself, can you allow yourself to be resilient, not by ignoring pain, but by integrating it? Can you accept life's chaos and still choose to move forward with courage? There's a human truth I want to share. No matter who you are, no matter how accomplished, the world can challenge you, judge you, or try to break you. But your inner life, your choices, your resilience, your authenticity cannot be touched unless you allow it. I realized that the collapse of my career was not the end. It was a mirror. It reflected who I really was, beneath the fame, beneath the roles, beneath the noise. And what I saw was someone capable of reinvention, depth, and authentic connection. Reflection. What mirrors are you avoiding? What truths about yourself are waiting to be acknowledged, even in the face of fear? The mini-climax of this phase is simple but powerful. When everything you thought defined you falls away, you discover what truly matters. Loss becomes clarity. Isolation becomes self-knowledge. Failure becomes a map, showing the way toward resilience, authenticity, and purpose. I began to understand that my career, my reputation, my identity, none of these were lost forever. They were merely reshaped, refined, and aligned with who I was meant to become. Ask yourself, if life stripped everything away tomorrow, what would remain? And how could you use that as the foundation for your next chapter? There is a moment in every life when the storm reaches its peak, and you are forced to face yourself fully. The public may have judged me. The critics may have written their verdict, and friends may have walked away, but none of that could take away the truth I carried inside. I realized something that changed everything. My career, my reputation, and even my losses did not define me. Only my choices, my courage, and my ability to rise defined me. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't a sudden epiphany. It was a slow awakening, forged through sleepless nights, quiet reflection, and the courage to look at the wreckage of my life without flinching. And in that silence, I discovered a profound truth. Freedom is born when you stop seeking approval and start seeking authenticity. Ask yourself, what part of your life is still being defined by others? How would it feel to reclaim that power, piece by piece, with intention and clarity? Resilience is not something you inherit. It is not something that luck provides. Resilience is a deliberate choice, a daily act of courage, persistence, and self-trust. I learned that resilience is not about pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about walking through it, feeling it, integrating it, letting the lessons of heartbreak, failure, betrayal, and public scrutiny guide you instead of destroy you. Ask yourself, when life hits hard, do you fight, retreat, or reflect? Which choice builds your resilience and which drains it? Because resilience is the difference between a life shattered and a life reborn. The next realization was equally profound. Authenticity is the ultimate freedom. For decades, I performed not just on screen, but in life, trying to meet expectations, trying to fit molds, trying to be what the world wanted me to be. It took losing almost everything to see the truth. I had been living a shadow of myself, and my real self had been waiting all along. When I allowed myself to embrace authenticity, everything shifted. My choices aligned with my values. My art regained meaning. Even relationships became more real and profound because they were built on truth, not illusion. Reflect. How often do you hide behind masks to protect yourself or to please others? What would happen if you lived fully as your authentic self, unapologetically? By this point, I had embraced failure like a teacher rather than a punishment. Every role that faltered, every public critique, every loss, each was a lesson in disguise. I realized, failure does not mark the end of a journey. It illuminates the path forward. It forces introspection, clarity, and courage. Without failure, we never see the edges of our own strength or the depth of our own creativity. Ask yourself, are you resisting failure or are you learning from it? Are you afraid of mistakes or are you embracing them as stepping stones to growth? Because it is in failure that we often find our truest selves. Perhaps the most subtle yet profound lesson was gratitude. Not gratitude for success, not gratitude for applause, but gratitude for the small, often overlooked moments that make life worth living. A kind word, a quiet morning, the chance to create, the love of a friend or family member. When everything seemed lost, I began documenting small things I was grateful for. It changed my perspective. It transformed despair into possibility. It reminded me that even in darkness, there is light if you are willing to see it. Ask yourself, what are you grateful for today, even in your struggles? How could gratitude shift your mindset and open doors to resilience, joy, and clarity? By now, the tapestry of my experiences, failure, betrayal, heartbreak, loneliness, reinvention, authenticity, and gratitude, was converging. The pain I had endured, the loss I had suffered, the public scrutiny I had faced, all of it became the soil in which my transformation grew. The emotional payoff is simple, yet profound. Life's hardest trials are also its greatest teachers. They force reflection, resilience, courage, and authenticity. They push you to discover strength you never knew you had and purpose you never realized you were seeking. Reflect. How can your pain become your teacher? How can your struggles transform into a roadmap for growth and clarity? And then it hit me. The ultimate realization. I understood that life is not about avoiding pain, criticism, or failure. Life is about responding to it. How you react, how you rise, how you integrate every experience. This is what defines your story. I realized my career being shattered was not the end. It was an opportunity to rediscover myself, to embrace authenticity, and to live a life aligned with truth, purpose, and courage. In that moment, I felt an almost overwhelming sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I was free, not from challenges, not from scrutiny, not from life, but from the fear that had kept me tethered to others' expectations. Ask yourself, what chains are holding you back? What fears are keeping you from living fully? And how would your life transform if you embraced freedom, resilience, and authenticity today? I want you to pause for a moment and think about this. What does failure feel like to you? Not the kind you rehearse in your mind, but the one that hits you in the chest so hard it knocks the air out of your lungs. That's the failure I experienced. Not because I made a single catastrophic mistake, but because the world around me decided that I had. I remember walking into the premiere of one of my films, feeling the buzz, the flashing cameras, the applause. And yet, somewhere in that glittering crowd, I felt a strange, creeping emptiness. Critics had started writing things I didn't recognize. People I thought I knew began whispering, misinterpreting, assuming. And overnight, the first final lesson is perhaps the hardest to grasp. Life is uncertain. No matter how much you plan, strategize, or protect yourself, unpredictability will arrive. For me, the collapse of my career was a brutal reminder of this truth. At first, it felt unbearable. The future I had imagined, roles, recognition, stability, vanished overnight. But in that void, I discovered something profound. The unknown is not your enemy. It is the space where possibility is born. I began to embrace uncertainty instead of fearing it. I realized that every step into the unknown was an opportunity to learn, to create, and to evolve. Fear of the unknown had controlled me for years. Letting it go gave me freedom I had never experienced. Ask yourself, how often do you resist the unknown? What possibilities might open if you met uncertainty with curiosity rather than fear? The second final lesson is about the power of connection. In the darkest periods of my life, I realized that no one truly survives alone. The whispers, betrayal, and public scrutiny had isolated me. Yet the few authentic relationships I nurtured became lifelines. I learned that true connection is built on vulnerability, honesty, and shared humanity. Those who remained were not impressed by fame or wealth. They were inspired by authenticity, courage, and resilience. Reflect. Who in your life is truly connected to your authentic self? Are you investing in relationships that nourish your soul, or are you distracted by surface-level interactions? Connection is not just emotional. It is the anchor that allows us to face chaos, heartbreak, and uncertainty with strength and grace. Perhaps the most powerful realization is this: life is a series of choices, and those choices define your story far more than circumstances ever could. I could have let despair consume me. I could have surrendered to public judgment or bitterness. Instead, I chose resilience. I chose authenticity. I chose gratitude. I chose to reinvent my life on my own terms. Every choice we make, no matter how small, shapes our trajectory. And the incredible part, even in loss, we retain the power to choose, the power to rise, the power to define ourselves. Ask yourself, what choices are you making today that shape the story of your life? Are they aligned with your values, your purpose, and your authentic self? The ultimate realization. The culmination of all experiences, heartbreaks, betrayals, failures, and lessons is this: freedom comes through truth. When I finally stopped chasing approval, stopped fearing failure, and stopped hiding behind masks, I discovered liberation. I realized that no headline, no rumor, no external judgment could touch the truth I held inside. My career could be shattered, my reputation questioned, but my essence remained untouchable, and in that moment, a deep, almost indescribable peace washed over me. I wasn't defined by fame or fortune, by applause or rejection, by love or loss. I was defined by my courage, my choices, my authenticity, and my willingness to continue, no matter what. Reflect. What truth are you hiding from the world? What masks are you wearing that keep you from freedom? How might your life change if you embraced your truth fully, unapologetically? Now, let me leave you with the life-changing advice that I wish I had learned earlier. 1. Embrace your failures. They are lessons in disguise, teachers of resilience, and maps for growth. 2. Trust yourself. No one else can define your worth or your path. Your choices are your power. 3. Live authentically. Stop performing to please the world. Your truth is your compass. 4. Seek connection. Surround yourself with people who see your real self and nurture it. 5. Practice gratitude. Even in darkness, small joys illuminate the path forward. 6. Face the unknown. Uncertainty is where growth, creativity, and freedom reside. The road will not be easy. The storms will come. People will judge, betray, and disappoint. But every challenge is a lesson, every setback an opportunity, and every ending a doorway to a new beginning. When life collapses, will you crumble or rise? Who are you beneath the expectations, the roles, and the masks? How will you define yourself when no one else applauds? What lessons and pain are waiting to guide you toward your next chapter? These questions are not meant to be answered once. They are companions on your journey, guiding you toward growth, clarity, and freedom. I will leave you with this thought: life is fragile, unpredictable, and often unfair. But it is also beautiful, transformative, and brimming with possibility. Losing everything is not the end. It can be the beginning of discovering who you truly are, what you truly value, and what you are capable of becoming. Music swells to a triumphant, cinematic peak, strings, piano, and soft percussion rising together. Your story is yours to write. Your failures, heartbreaks, and challenges are the ink. Your courage, authenticity, and resilience are the pen. And when you write with truth, the life you create will be far more extraordinary than any applause, any accolade, or any temporary success the world could ever offer. One lesson that grew clearer as the dust settled was the power of patience. In a world that thrives on instant gratification, immediate success, and constant validation, patience can feel impossible. I had spent years chasing immediate recognition, fearing that any pause meant failure. But the collapse of my career forced me to slow down, to observe, and to trust the process. I discovered that growth is not linear, healing is not instant, reinvention takes time. Patience became the soil in which resilience could truly take root. Ask yourself, are you impatient with your own growth? Are you rushing through life without allowing your experiences to settle, teach, and transform you? Because patience is not passive, it is active, deliberate, and powerful. It allows you to endure, to reflect, and to emerge stronger than you imagined. Another lesson revealed itself slowly: the art of letting go. I had clung to the past, old successes, old relationships, old identities, long after they had ceased to serve me. Holding on was exhausting. It drained creativity, joy, and energy. The moment I allowed myself to release what I could not control, I felt a profound shift. Letting go is not giving up. It is making room for new opportunities, for authentic relationships, for growth, and for self-discovery. Reflect. What in your life are you holding on to that no longer serves you? How might releasing it free you to move forward with clarity and purpose? This was a turning point. By letting go of attachments to outcomes, I was able to engage fully with life, with work, and with relationships, unburdened by fear or expectation. This is the lesson I learned. Your reputation is not yours alone. It is borrowed from others, and it can vanish in an instant. But your integrity, your commitment to truth, your inner voice, those are yours forever. Ask yourself, how much of your life is defined by the perception of others? How much do you bend or break yourself to fit a mold you didn't create? Because here's the truth. The world will always try to rewrite your story. Your challenge is to hold the pen. One of the most important mini lessons I discovered is that your art or your work, your passion, your purpose is inseparable from your identity. Early in my career, I defined success by external markers, fame, awards, and approval. It took losing almost everything to understand that true fulfillment comes from creating work that aligns with your values, speaks to your soul, and connects with your essence. When I focused on authenticity in my art, rather than validation from others, I rediscovered joy, purpose, and meaning. Reflect. Are you pursuing your passion, or are you pursuing approval? How would your life change if you focused on what nourishes your soul rather than what impresses others? Silence became one of my most powerful allies. In the face of public scrutiny, gossip, and judgment, I learned to speak less and reflect more. In silence, I found clarity, perspective, and strength. When the world demands that you defend yourself constantly, retreating into silence can be revolutionary. It allows you to focus on what truly matters, to choose your responses deliberately, and to conserve energy for what is meaningful. Ask yourself, when could you benefit from more silence? What might clarity reveal if you paused, reflected, and listened to your inner voice? Perfection is an illusion. I spent years chasing an ideal version of myself, on screen, in public, and even in private. The pressure to be flawless was suffocating. The collapse of my career forced me to confront imperfection, not as a flaw, but as the very essence of humanity. I realized that imperfection brings creativity, relatability, and growth. Flaws are not weaknesses. They are the fingerprints of individuality. Embracing imperfection allowed me to step into my truth, to take risks, and to experience life with courage rather than fear. Reflect. What imperfections have you been hiding? How might embracing them unlock freedom, creativity, and authenticity in your life? Courage is rarely a dramatic act. It is a series of small, deliberate choices, getting up when you feel broken, speaking the truth when it is difficult, pursuing authenticity when fear tempts you to hide. I discovered that courage is cumulative. Each small act reinforces the next. Each choice, no matter how minor, compounds into the strength to face larger storms. Ask yourself, what small act of courage can you take today? How will it shape your path, your resilience, and your story? Finally, I realized that life is a story, and I'm both the author and the protagonist. I cannot control every chapter, but I can choose the themes, the tone, and the narrative arc. I can decide how to respond to tragedy, how to engage with relationships, and how to interpret challenges. Your story is never over. Each setback is a plot twist. each loss a catalyst, each lesson a plot device, and the most powerful realization: the ending is not written until you choose it. Reflect. How are you writing your story today? Are you living reactively, or are you crafting a narrative of courage, resilience, and authenticity? One of the hardest realities I faced was the burden of perception. People believed they knew me, had a right to judge me, and felt entitled to my story. Headlines, social media, gossip, it all painted a version of my life that wasn't mine. At first, it crushed me. I felt invisible in my own narrative, lost beneath the assumptions of strangers. But slowly, I realized perception is never your truth. Others will project their fears, biases, and expectations onto you. But their view is not your reality. Ask yourself, whose perception are you living for? How often do you let the judgment of others shape your decisions, your confidence, or your path? Once I understood this, I stopped trying to convince the world of my worth and focused instead on living my truth. That alone began to rebuild my strength and my clarity. The 12th lesson came through the painful recognition that not everyone deserves access to your energy, your trust, or your life. For years, I let relationships, commitments, and obligations dictate my mental and emotional state. I said yes when I should have said no, giving away pieces of myself to preserve appearances or placate others. It took heartbreak and betrayal to teach me the power of boundaries. I began to define what I would accept and what I would not, both in my personal life and my career. Boundaries became a shield and a compass, protecting my energy and guiding my choices. Reflect, where are your boundaries weak? Are you allowing others to dictate your life or drain your energy unnecessarily? What would happen if you stood firm, with clarity and self-respect? Boundaries do not create isolation. They create space for authenticity. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage is to change direction entirely. I had been on a path that seemed preordained: roles, fame, and recognition. But the collapse of my career forced a reckoning. What if I walked a different path, one that aligned more with my soul than my public persona? It was terrifying. It required leaving comfort, predictability, and approval behind. But I realized that true fulfillment often lies beyond the familiar, in places where fear and opportunity intersect. I began choosing projects, creative endeavors, and personal paths that resonated deeply, regardless of public reception. Ask yourself, what path are you afraid to take because it challenges expectation? How might your life transform if you pursued alignment over approval? Courage isn't loud. It is quiet, persistent, and rooted in self. Another experience revealed that solitude is not loneliness, it is strength. In the aftermath of loss, heartbreak, and public scrutiny, I spent long nights alone, reflecting, writing, and confronting my fears. I realized that solitude allows you to hear your own voice, understand your own desires, and reclaim your own power. It became a sanctuary where I could process, heal, and plan my next steps without distraction. Reflect. Are you uncomfortable with solitude, or do you embrace it as an opportunity for reflection and self-discovery? How might silence reveal the answers you've been seeking? Solitude, once feared, became a source of clarity and resilience I could carry into every relationship and decision. By this point, I understood that my life's narrative, every failure, every heartbreak, every triumph, was mine to embrace, not hide. For too long, I wished for a cleaner story, a simpler path. But life doesn't offer perfection. It offers depth. I began to own my story fully, including the chaos and mistakes, because that story was the source of my power. Authenticity, after all, grows not from perfection, but from honesty. Ask yourself, are you hiding parts of your story out of shame or fear? How might owning your full life story, flaws and all, transform your confidence and your sense of self? Owning your story is not about pride. It is about freedom, clarity, and empowerment. Life is not only defined by grand events or public milestones. Sometimes, the most transformative moments are small. A conversation with a friend, a walk in the morning light, a quiet reflection, a deliberate act of kindness. I discovered that consistently noticing and valuing small moments creates momentum, resilience, and inner peace. When life feels overwhelming, these micro-experiences anchor you. They remind you that growth and healing are built gradually, moment by moment. Ask yourself, what small moments are you overlooking today? How could focusing on them transform your perception, energy, and path forward? After isolation, heartbreak, and public scrutiny, I realized the importance of reconnecting with people, with passions, and with myself. Courage is not just about confronting fear. It is about rebuilding bridges, nurturing relationships, and rediscovering joy despite past pain. Ask yourself, where have you withdrawn unnecessarily? What connections could you courageously rebuild, even if it feels risky or uncomfortable? Reconnection is not weakness. It is a choice to reclaim life, love, and purpose on your own terms. By this stage of reflection, a pattern emerges. Pain teaches clarity. Solitude teaches strength. Failure teaches resilience. And authenticity teaches freedom. The mini-climactic insight is clear. Every experience, no matter how devastating, contains the seeds of transformation. Ask yourself, are you willing to mine your own experiences for lessons? Are you ready to embrace discomfort, uncertainty, and challenge as the path to growth? Trust had been one of the hardest things to rebuild. After betrayal, broken friendships, and public scrutiny, I questioned my instincts, doubted intentions, and feared being hurt again. I realized that trust is both fragile and powerful. It must be earned, nurtured, and also given cautiously. Relearning trust required patience and discernment. I had to distinguish between people who sought connection and those who sought advantage. I had to rebuild faith in myself first before offering it to others. Ask yourself, where has fear of betrayal held you back? How might rebuilding trust with yourself and others transform your relationships and sense of security? Trust is not blind. It is courageous, deliberate, and restorative. The 15th lesson was equally profound. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not others. Holding on to anger, resentment, or bitterness only prolongs suffering. At first, I resisted forgiveness, believing it would condone wrongdoing. But I realized that forgiveness is about reclaiming your own peace. It is a conscious act of releasing the weight of the past so you can move forward freely. I forgave myself for mistakes, others for betrayal, and even life for its harshness. In that moment, I felt liberation like never before. Reflect. What resentments are you carrying that no longer serve you? How might forgiving others and yourself unlock freedom, clarity, and emotional strength? Forgiveness is not weakness. It is an act of profound courage and self-empowerment. In the wake of loss, I had to rediscover why I fell in love with my craft in the first place. It wasn't for awards, fame, or validation. It was for expression, creativity, and connection. I began to pursue projects that resonated with my soul, regardless of their marketability or public reception. This reconnection with passion reminded me that fulfillment comes from alignment, not applause. Ask yourself, what passion have you set aside to chase approval or success? How might reconnecting with it reignite your purpose and joy? Authentic work is never wasted. It is the path to self-discovery and fulfillment. Fear had been a constant companion, fear of judgment, failure, and loss. Yet, through all the experiences, I discovered that fear is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Facing fear requires deliberate action, reflection, and often discomfort. Every time I confronted a fear, no matter how small, I reclaimed a piece of myself. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it. Ask yourself, what fear have you avoided that is silently shaping your life? What would happen if you faced it today, step by step, with honesty and resolve? Courage transforms fear into fuel, propelling you forward rather than holding you back. Even in chaos, daily habits and discipline became my anchor. Creating structure, committing to reflection, journaling, and nurturing creativity every day, no matter how small, allowed me to regain stability. Discipline is not restriction. It is liberation. It gives form to chaos, focus to intention, and momentum to growth. I realized that small, consistent actions compound into monumental change over time. Reflect. What small habits can you commit to today that will transform your life in the long term? How might discipline free you from the chaos of uncertainty? Humility is not self-doubt. It is self-awareness. After years of public success and scrutiny, I learned that acknowledging limitations, mistakes, and the need for growth strengthens character, relationships, and resilience. I discovered that humility allows learning, adaptation, and deeper connection with others. It transforms arrogance into authenticity and pride into purpose. Ask yourself, are you open to learning and growth? Or does pride blind you? How might humility deepen your relationships, creativity, and inner strength? By now, a clear pattern emerges. Life is not just a sequence of events. It is a series of lessons. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every triumph, and every setback carries insight. The key is not to avoid challenges, but to extract meaning from them. I realize that pain and success are intertwined. Without challenges, we never recognize our resilience. Without failure, we never understand growth. Without reflection, we never find clarity. Reflect. What lessons are hidden in your current struggles? How can they guide you to greater insight, strength, and authenticity? Life is teaching continuously. It is up to us to observe, reflect, and act. By this point, the mini-climactic insight is undeniable. Life does not define you. Your responses define you. Every experience, good or bad, is neutral until you assign meaning, take action, and shape your narrative. Ask yourself, how are you responding to your current challenges? Are you choosing growth, resilience, and authenticity, or reacting out of fear, shame, or inertia? This realization transforms perspective. It turns despair into empowerment, chaos into clarity, and loss into opportunity. Vulnerability had always been something I avoided. To appear strong, to maintain control, I masked my emotions and hid my struggles. But losing my career, facing public judgment, and enduring heartbreak forced me to confront the power of vulnerability. I realized that true connection, creativity, and resilience are born from exposing your true self. It was terrifying at first, opening up, admitting fear, and sharing raw emotion in a world that often mocks weakness. But I discovered that vulnerability is not weakness, it is courage in its purest form. Ask yourself, in what areas of your life are you hiding? What would happen if you allowed yourself to be seen fully, without pretense? Vulnerability became the bridge between despair and authenticity, teaching me that life often doesn't follow the path we imagine. For years, I sought control, perfection in my career, stability in my personal life, certainty in every decision. The collapse of my career taught me that control is an illusion. I had to learn to trust the journey, to embrace detours, setbacks, and uncertainty as essential parts of growth. Every misstep, every failure, every unplanned event became a lesson, a guide, and a stepping stone to a better, more aligned life. Reflect. Are you resisting life's natural flow? What might you discover if you allowed yourself to trust the journey, even when the path is unclear? Trusting the journey transforms fear into curiosity and stagnation into momentum. Amid chaos and public scrutiny, I discovered that happiness does not come from recognition, wealth, or accolades. It comes from simplicity, a quiet morning, a shared laugh, a creative project pursued for passion rather than approval. These small moments revealed profound joy. I realized that simplicity restores balance, clarity, and perspective. In the pursuit of external validation, I had overlooked life's subtle wonders. Reconnecting with these moments became essential to my healing and growth. Ask yourself, are you overlooking the simple joys in your life? How might noticing them daily shift your perspective and bring lasting fulfillment? Saying no is deceptively powerful. For years, I said yes to everything: roles, commitments, relationships, driven by fear, obligation, or desire to please. But saying yes indiscriminately drains energy, blurs boundaries, and sacrifices authenticity. Learning to say no became an act of courage, clarity, and self-respect. It allowed me to focus on what truly matters and create space for growth, creativity, and connection that aligned with my values. Reflect. Where in your life do you need the courage to say no? How might this choice restore your energy and sense of purpose? Change is rarely easy. It feels disruptive, uncomfortable, and even threatening. But I learned that change is the vehicle for growth and reinvention. Every collapse, every loss, every unexpected turn of events carried the seeds of opportunity. Rather than resisting, I began to embrace change deliberately, choosing actions that reflected my evolving values, passions, and vision. The more I accepted it, the more freedom and creativity I discovered. Ask yourself, how do you respond to change? Are you resisting it or embracing it as a catalyst for personal evolution? Change is not an obstacle. It is the doorway to transformation. Persistence became the backbone of my recovery. Even when rejection, criticism, and setbacks threatened to halt progress, I realized that small, consistent efforts compound into monumental change. Each day, I wrote, reflected, created, and acted in alignment with my purpose. Slowly, the pieces of my shattered career, my fractured relationships, and my emotional turmoil began to transform into a coherent, meaningful path forward. Reflect. Where in your life could persistence, even in small doses, create profound impact? Are you giving up too soon or willing to continue despite obstacles? Persistence turns adversity into progress, doubt into action, and setbacks into preparation for success. The mini-climactic realization of this stage is profound. Success is not fame, fortune, or approval. It is alignment with your values, authenticity, and the courage to pursue your purpose relentlessly. I began to redefine success on my own terms. Roles chosen for passion, relationships nurtured with honesty, and moments savored with gratitude became my new markers of achievement. Ask yourself, how are you defining success? Is it based on societal expectation or on the truth of your own heart and purpose? When you redefine success through authenticity, resilience, and intention, every challenge becomes meaningful, and every achievement becomes deeply fulfilling. One of the most difficult lessons was learning to be kind to myself. In the face of failure, public scrutiny, and personal heartbreak, self-criticism was relentless. I had spent years punishing myself for mistakes and perceived shortcomings. But slowly, I discovered self-compassion is not indulgence. It is survival, clarity, and strength. Allowing myself grace, acknowledging pain, and giving myself permission to heal became essential steps in rebuilding my life. Ask yourself, how harshly are you judging yourself? What would happen if you treated yourself with the same kindness you offer others? Self-compassion does not excuse mistakes. It empowers growth, resilience, and authenticity. Adversity can feel like an endless weight, but I realize that within every challenge lies an opportunity to discover purpose. The collapse of my career forced me to re-examine my values, priorities, and the meaning behind my work. I discovered that purpose is not about recognition or approval. It is about alignment with your core values, contribution to others, and the expression of your true self. Reflect. How can your current struggles reveal deeper meaning in your life? Are you using challenges as obstacles or as teachers guiding you toward purpose? Purpose is not found. It is uncovered through reflection, resilience, and action. I had often hidden emotions behind charm, humor, or performance. Losing everything forced me to confront raw feelings, fear, sadness, anger, and vulnerability. I learned that emotional honesty is the foundation of authentic living. By acknowledging my emotions without judgment, I was able to process pain, make clearer decisions, and form deeper connections. Emotional honesty became a lens through which life felt more real, meaningful, and navigable. Ask yourself, are you honest with yourself about what you feel? How might embracing your emotions fully transform your choices, relationships, and self-understanding? Emotional honesty is not weakness. It is a form of strength that unlocks clarity, freedom, and connection. Confidence is often misunderstood as arrogance or certainty. In reality, it is a quiet, steady trust in yourself, cultivated through action, reflection, and resilience. I had lost confidence during the darkest periods of my career. Every public judgment chipped away at my sense of self. But by taking deliberate steps, reclaiming passions, embracing failures, setting boundaries, I began to rebuild confidence from the inside out. Reflect. Where has fear eroded your confidence? How can deliberate, small actions restore your trust in yourself? Confidence, when rebuilt authentically, becomes a guiding force, not a performance for others. Amid chaos, I learned the transformative power of presence. Often, I was consumed by regrets of the past or anxieties about the future. But mindfulness, fully inhabiting each moment, observing without judgment, brought clarity, peace, and focus. By practicing mindful presence, I began to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. It allowed me to savor small joys, navigate challenges calmly, and align actions with values. Ask yourself, how often are you truly present? How might embracing the moment shift your perspective and choices? Mindful presence is not passive. It is deliberate, empowering, and grounding. I realize that relationships are mirrors reflecting both strengths and weaknesses. In difficult times, some relationships failed, revealing incompatibility or lack of authenticity. Others strengthened, revealing trust, empathy, and shared values. This taught me to choose relationships consciously, investing in those that nurture growth and align with authenticity, while releasing toxic patterns. Reflect. Which relationships in your life are uplifting and authentic? Which ones require courage to transform or release? Redefining relationships is an act of self-respect and an essential step toward a fulfilling life. By now, The pattern is undeniable. Self-compassion, purpose, emotional honesty, confidence, presence, and conscious relationships are interconnected threads. They form a tapestry of growth forged through adversity. Ask yourself, can you see the lessons hidden within your struggles? Are you willing to weave them into a life of authenticity, resilience, and meaningful connection? After losing so much, joy felt distant, almost impossible to reclaim. I had to actively rediscover what made me smile, laugh, and feel alive. It wasn't in accolades or approval. It was in small, authentic moments. A morning coffee, creative experiments, conversations with trusted friends, quiet walks, and music. I realized that joy is a practice, not a consequence. It must be consciously cultivated, especially when life feels heavy. Each small spark of happiness became a thread that wove resilience, hope, and gratitude into my days. Reflect. What small moments of joy have you overlooked? How can you consciously invite more joy into your life, even amidst challenges? Joy does not erase pain, but it balances it, giving perspective and fuel to continue. Failure had once felt like a dead end, but I came to understand that failure is a teacher disguised as hardship. Every setback, every criticism, every lost opportunity contained lessons essential for growth. I learned to analyze failure without self-condemnation, extracting insight, strategy, and perspective. Courage is not about never failing. It is about embracing failure, learning from it, and stepping forward stronger. Ask yourself, how do you perceive failure? As an end or a lesson? How might embracing failure change the trajectory of your life? Failure is not defeat. It is a portal to resilience, creativity, and authenticity. Failure had once felt like a dead end, but I came to understand that failure is a teacher disguised as hardship. Every setback, every criticism, every lost opportunity contained lessons essential for growth. I learned to analyze failure without self-condemnation, extracting insight, strategy, and perspective. Courage is not about never failing. It is about embracing failure, learning from it, and stepping forward stronger. Ask yourself, how do you perceive failure? As an end or a lesson? How might embracing failure change the trajectory of your life? Failure is not defeat. It is a portal to resilience, creativity, and authenticity. Failure had once felt like a dead end, but I came to understand that failure is a teacher disguised as hardship. Every setback, every criticism, every lost opportunity contained lessons essential for growth. I learned to analyze failure without self-condemnation, extracting insight, strategy, and perspective. Courage is not about never failing. It is about embracing failure, learning from it, and stepping forward stronger. Ask yourself, how do you perceive failure? As an end or a lesson? How might embracing failure change the trajectory of your life? Failure is not defeat. It is a portal to resilience, creativity, and authenticity. Gratitude became a lifeline. In moments of despair, I began to notice what remained: health, talent, a roof over my head, loyal friends, creative outlets. By acknowledging these constants, I shifted from scarcity to abundance, from despair to hope. Gratitude allowed me to see opportunity where I had once only seen loss. Reflect. What can you be grateful for today, even in the midst of difficulty? How might gratitude shift your mindset, energy, and decisions? Gratitude is not a passive feeling. It's an active practice that rewires perception, fuels resilience, and fosters joy. Through isolation, I realized that true connections are forged through vulnerability. Sharing fear, weakness, and hopes with trusted individuals allowed me to experience profound intimacy, trust, and support. I learned that relationships built on pretense or ego cannot endure adversity. Vulnerability became the bridge that strengthened bonds, nurtured empathy, and cultivated meaningful collaboration. Ask yourself, who in your life could you connect with more honestly? How might vulnerability deepen your relationships and support your growth? Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the doorway to authentic human connection. I realize that life offers multiple opportunities for reinvention. I was not defined by past mistakes, losses, or judgments. I could rewrite my narrative, pivot creatively, and redefine success according to my values. Reinvention is deliberate and courageous. It requires honesty, reflection, and the willingness to step into the unknown. Each new project, relationship, or creative endeavor became a canvas for expression and transformation. Reflect. What part of your life feels stagnant or limiting? What reinvention is possible if you embrace courage and authenticity? Reinvention is not abandoning the past. It is integrating experience to create a more aligned, purposeful future. The collapse of my career taught me that certainty is often an illusion. Life is inherently unpredictable. Rather than resisting uncertainty, I began to lean into it as a source of possibility. Uncertainty became the space where creativity, resilience, and personal growth flourished. By embracing it, I discovered freedom from fear, control, and rigid expectation. Ask yourself, how often do you resist the unknown? What opportunities might appear if you embraced uncertainty with curiosity instead of fear? Uncertainty is not chaos. It is the fertile ground where transformation begins. By this stage, the overarching lesson becomes clear. Alignment with values, authenticity, and purpose is true freedom. Everything else, fame, fortune, approval, fades in comparison. Ask yourself, are your actions aligned with your deepest values and purpose? Are you living a life dictated by external expectation or your own truth? When alignment guides action, life becomes less reactive and more intentional. Obstacles are opportunities, failures are lessons, and every moment carries potential for growth.